Hello and welcome to episode 141 of The Imperial Truth. I'm Greg and joining me is Mr. Howard. How are you doing, Howard?
Very well, thank you, Greg. How are you doing?
Yeah, can't grumble. Before we go too far, let's mention Element Games. I put my order in for Pariah Nexus, or whatever it's called, for some heavy assault intercessor. Heavy intercessors, isn't it? Yep, I did that.
One combination of those words, yeah.
Yeah. What was good was I was like, my mate did it, and I was like, just trying to work out what paint to put in to get me to free shipping. And he was like, oh, yeah, I should have done that. I'm like, yeah, you should have. But but the good thing was so I don't, if no one, if you've tried to buy Vallejo paints recently, they can be a real beggar to get hold of. And I had to cancel one of my order because stuff wasn't coming and I needed a birthday present for my brother-in-law. And then went to order today and they were in stock. I was like, yes. So hopefully we can get on. There's another project that's waiting in the wings, but Element have it all, and hopefully that Pariah Nexus might be here Saturday. You never know. Even with it was another Amazon delivery from Element. I don't know kind of if everything's going that way or whatever, but it made sure it came fairly promptly. Which at the moment
that's really good. I mean, their logistics is superb generally, so that's fantastic if they're working with that.
Yeah, I don't know how that affects people in Europe because I know that in one of the book collecting purchase sites on Facebook, all the Europeans, bless them, are trying to work out which part of the depot in Belgium, I think it is, all their books are being held in, and there's no coherent method of working through the backlog that's occurred through all the various reasons that are going on at the moment. So having stuff turn up on time is pretty sweet. So
yes.
Can't grumble.
Really now of all times, yes.
Yeah, big time. And also, of course, Geek Shield. So if you are considering life insurance or think you may have good life insurance but want to just check it over, then go and give Pete a call at Geek Shield and he will sort you out. But yeah, how are you doing? You're all moved into a new house now, aren't you?
I am, at last, finally, and itching to get back into the hobby. I'm currently surrounded by paint racks which have finally been set up. It's one of those necessary things. It brings you a strange sort of satisfaction, but I think I'm finally keen to just get cracking again and start building armies, building squads, building and painting again, in preparation for what will hobefully be rolling some dice soon.
Well, yes, and I think there could be a surge of hobbying going on for those people who can hobby when there's not the impending doom of an event time limit approaching. Fair play to you. Lots of people can't, but yeah, we got a hope of being able to meet up. I think some people are getting a little bit ahead of themselves. I had someone basically saying, "Are you organising an event?" And I'm like, "I will when I know we can have one," because one minor blip could set us back 5-10 weeks. In the UK,
any major organised play type event, I think is probably still a way away from terms of how much we can commit to. But just the very prospect of even being able to visit friends, and even as we speak now of a weekend after the weather has started to turn and be a bit more pleasant, I'm looking now. I have the pleasure now of a garden, which in dear London can be a luxury. The idea of playing even a game in the garden, in the end, playing al fresco, is sounding really quite attractive right now.
Indeed.
Just small scale games, I'll take that.
Yep, Garden Hammer, where you step away from the table once you've moved your models, and you don't share dice and all that kind of stuff is not a, it can work. So that's just good. It's I mean, the good thing for me is not necessarily the timescale. Say, I'm not gonna assume anything until we actually get to that point. But we have it's in sight. And that makes it difficult in a way because it's so close. But at least we know we're on the right path. And I'm sure in the winter we're probably going to have a couple of weeks where we lock down again when viruses do tend to hit harder again. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but at least we we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel?
There's a whole range of things that we're all going to be dealing with different stuff in the future. I am itching to have. I mean, I think someone put up on because it's this time of year. We're coming now to the end of February. Someone posted up and said it would be about this time. However many, what seems like a decade ago, we would have been at the Heresy Weekender, and I'm thinking, yep, I knew I felt that. I felt the lack of those events, not necessarily organised play events, but those everyone getting together and sharing those things, of which the Heresy Weekender was my premier event, really, of all of the events for all game systems. And it just reminded me really quite a surprising gut punch how much I miss those events, absolutely. And how much I'm looking forward to this. I think we're a hell of a way off those. And actually, I wonder if the people who attend is going to be very different as well, because I think the people are going to have different attitudes to these things. I know several people who are saying they won't go anywhere near those kinds of things for the foreseeable. Fair enough, but I don't care. I want to go to those events as soon as we all can.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I certainly with the Heresy Weekender, I was like, well, it wasn't going to happen this year anyway. So that was never even a concept for me. And when people's timelines did come up with, 2 years ago we were doing this, I was like, 2 years ago I lost 3.5 stone minimum in about a week. So, laying on a hospital bed, hearing everyone's things. So it was a bit of a mixed kind of review for me of that time. But it is what it is.
Yeah, we'll dial it back 3 years in your case.
Yeah, indeed. But yeah, you're right. Adepticon is end of March, and I know that one's going to be like, oof. Even though I wasn't. Well, no, I would have been planning to go this year because it was Nova that I had cancelled. It will be. It's going to be. By the time I get to go to Adepticon, it's 3 years later. Since I've seen my American mates, it's like
but it's going to make those first ones all the sweeter.
Well,
regardless of what other changes are in place, I think it's going to make them all the more exciting.
It is. I think it's going to make it more stressful though as well. There's first off the amount of people who are going to want to be going to these events, particularly in a year's time.
Yeah.
So in a year's time when, so Nova might, I don't know what Nova are doing, but LVO will probably be running. That'll be a big one, and people will be scrabbling to get to the first big international kind of event. Yeah. There could be stress in getting tickets and getting rooms, extra stress, should I say. And then when you're there, like the stress of, well, I need to catch up with everybody. Which
yes, there is that, but I think it's the novelty almost of it. I mean, I was thinking, funnily enough, I was actually thinking on the first Weekender type event I went to, which was the first Black Library one, and I remember being in the first seminar with Aaron, of all people. Aaron Dembski-Bowden was giving his book, and he was predictably nervous, and the energy that was around there, because no one knew what these things were, but they knew it was exciting. I almost feel we're going to get shades of that again, because they're going to be different kind of things again, and because there's been such a lack of those. Albeit, I've been quite impressed at the number of things that sprung up online, but I just think that's to me the big excitement. And I particularly think, obviously people whose main draw to the whole thing is organised play. I think people are going to get really excited for that. But for me, it's the more general, large scale events. And I can't wait. And I've got a feeling it feels like it's not something that's so far off it's not even worth considering.
Yeah,
now, I feel like we're past that point. God knows when it'll be. Who knows what's going to happen in the next few months? Could be it. But I'm prepared to be optimistic.
What would be interesting is the timescale of everything going on, and whether Games Workshop feel that a Black Library Weekender could happen this year. Because although booking out the hotel for them is the thing that needs to be done so far in advance, and they plan and a schedule planned, but they're still going to plan a year's schedule for what they're doing now, and maybe they could play around with that. I don't think that's the major issue. What's interesting is they only usually let us know 3 months in advance when they're doing one, so there's a potential for a timescale for something like that to happen. However, it would still need pre-organising far enough in advance that suggests that it possibly won't happen. But there's that outside chance that they do decide to do something.
It's a brave person in this climate to be the first person to say, yes, we're going to commit to this, plan it in all these environments and all the commitments.
Well, again, like they don't have to. They only have to have a fairly kind of loose plan if they can get the deal with the hotel. That means they're not tied into paying out the money. So they could plan stuff behind the scenes that we'll never know if it never happens, and then they can rejig release dates as required. So it depends if someone wants to put that effort in, knowing that it might not happen as well. So it's an outside chance, but
I would just thought if certainly at the corporate level rather than the sort of the fan level, I would have thought there's going to be a lot of companies in all spheres that are going to be very keen to watch how others do it. There's going to be a few who are going to just go off and do it, and I would have thought there's going to be a lot more who want to be in the second round. So I would have, as you say, next year, 2022 is going to be the one where it gets a bit mad, I suspect, and I'm all for it.
Which is weird because you're right. Anyone who runs a business, I believe, will do that. What I'm thinking is anyone who runs an independent event, and I've seen it with local events, has gone. I can't even remember the timescale in England. It's 21st of July, is it, that we're supposed to be clear of all this?
21st of June is when all of the lockdown restrictions, in theory, are removed. But in theory, overnight stays and a large portion of the hospitality sector will be open back end of May, I believe. Right,
cool. So let's. The people I have seen have said 21st of June. Cool, and that's a Monday, I think, isn't it, or something? I don't know, whatever.
Yes.
And literally have gone, okay, that Saturday, following Saturday, last weekend of June, one-day event going on here. And I'm like, and someone said to me, are you going? And I'm like, we're so far away from that happening.
There's so many ifs. Yeah.
That I'm not going to commit because I want to know. I don't want to do it. And someone said to me, are you organising an event for this summer? And I was like, no, because I don't want to have to go through the rigmarole of, it didn't happen, we'll move it back 3 months, and playing that game. But fair enough, other people do, and that's cool. But I think there's going to be a lot of independent events who don't have or don't think they have the same responsibility as a company, who will just be like, yeah, we're just going to ram them in, and people will flock.
Yeah.
LGT have said they're going ahead, and that's late September, so that's it's a little bit of a gap. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
I would have thought the September, October, November, the guys in the sort of third or maybe fourth quarter, I would have thought they're going to be reasonably confident, but they're still going to be very different events, aren't they?
Yeah. What will be interesting then is to see how many of these, because the other thing that happened was a lot of people cancelled events but kept money, and a lot of those then said it will be used for, it will be taken off your price for the next event when we do it, and they did that 3 months thing, for a whole year. So there's going to be people who are very keen to kind of get that out of their system. So Edge of Empire are now, they'll have missed three or three company legends. And, they're keen to put on an event, and they're keen to honour the people who paid the money. And that's completely understandable. Some other people are even more keen because of the way they went about things, to just try and swamp events out. So it could be that there are multiple events every weekend for the big game systems, and for others. And the other thing I think will be really interesting is how much people can go out, because I don't know about you, but I haven't used a huge amount of my holiday allowance when I can't go anywhere. So I'm looking at having extra because of the nature of the way the UK government did it and allowed us to carry over some of last year's, or all of last year's if you didn't take it. So do I save that towards the end of the year? But then people with families, like, how much are they going to be allowed to be doing that? It's
quite, and businesses, of course. That's would be true in our case. businesses are not going to be thrilled when someone goes, I think you'll find I've got a month's worth of holiday.
Yeah.
Well, we've only just survived the worst kind of crisis for business in a while.
Yeah.
So no thanks. There's a whole load of unknowns there, but there's some interesting new options there, isn't there?
Yeah, and I'm sure, some of those business, I'm sure some people are going to be caught out by, like, we're allowed out now and it's sunny. So everyone
we're
wants
going for it, thanks.
Everyone wants holiday, and that's a problem they have to sort out. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting end of the year, start of next year, I think, to see if people are just trying to ram their event in. Because there is this kind of fear, I think, if you've got a regular event that sells well, you almost don't want to lose that spot you have. And new events are always looking for, when should we run our event, And I think there's a bit of a fallacy sometimes in that people I don't want to run an event the same time as that person. And I'm like, but you're 200 miles away from each other. Like,
yeah.
And not only 200 miles now away from each other, but there's still more of the country past that they're attracting from. And again, it doesn't matter if your event's not 50 players. If it's 20 players, it's still a valid event. So it'll be interesting to see how people... There's a lot going on, and of course these
I think there is,
well.
and I think we're going to see a bit of an uptake. I mean, we've seen quite a swell in people working on things. Obviously, it's time has shifted for a huge amount of people where they've been forced to put more time into hobby than they might have otherwise been. It'd be interesting to see what the fruits of that are, how that continues. People might have picked up on things. We've got a whole load of new hobbyists who will have tried this out for a new something. They've got a whole new range of experiences ahead of them. Yeah,
always grinds my gears a little bit, and it's not, it's completely understandable. You hear it on podcasts it's like, well, there's so much time now to hobby. All these people are getting all this hobby done, and I'm like,
I'm not so sure about that.
No, I know, yeah, exactly, and I'm like, I've done less hobby this year because I really haven't. And some people who've had the time haven't been doing the hobby because they're not in the right mental state to do it either, and those things like that as well.
I would say it's probably more common. Because obviously there's a full range of things that happen to people. I would say it's more common that people may have done things differently. I'm not sure I've hobbied anymore, or the time I would have spent. The amount of times I spent gaming where I actually spent more of that time painting. That doesn't mean people are saying, I hope your backlog's cleared by the end of. I hope everyone's backlog is cleared by the end of lockdown. No, it's increased because, funnily enough, I've given in and gone, I'd like to feel better, please. I'm going to order some stuff online and have it sit over there in a box. I suspect I'm not alone.
Don't get me wrong.
There's people who have shifted things. I think. I mean, I've painted things in a different way. I experimented painting, rediscovered the airbrush and things like that. Great, just try some new techniques, new things like that. But I think I think there will be new hobbyists out there who may have never experienced a club environment or an organised play environment, that sort of stuff. I think that could be quite fun.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just that whole, I'm not saying being on furlough is easy. I have one of the personality types that would have managed it very, very well. My missus would have hated it. So, everyone's different. But I know that I was coming home when some people I know were really reveling in their time off, and I was coming home and just falling asleep straight from work because I was just blown away from it, and and I was just working hard. Like I'm not saying I'm saving the world or anything like that in the work I do, but it was taking its toll. So it's just every now and then someone says, "Oh yeah, well everyone's got so much hobby done," and I'm looking at them going, "Really?" But that is what it is. It's going to be a strange landscape for a whole variety of reasons. People are going to be taking less holidays as well, like abroad, so that time's going to be used differently. Lots of you can do what I know a guy on the Aegis or Warhammer scene used to do, and he went to Centre Parks for a lovely week with his family. And on the weekend, drove from Sherwood to Mansfield to play in a Warhammer tournament, and went back on the night of the Saturday night to see his family. So you can mix your holidays and your Warhammer as well. So
I suspect he's not alone in that. And the number of people I saw, particularly when international travel comes back again, the number of people who we used to see would say, "Oh, I was over here for work. I had to go to Warhammer World."
Yes,
I suspect
absolutely.
That's not alone.
Yeah, and I must admit, I just got an email today. If anyone follows my personal Twitter and saw me raging at a Podo recently, I do apologise, but I was desperately trying to get an actual decent answer off them, which they actually gave me a decent answer that explained a delay, which if they'd done that on their original one instead of just saying no, we're waiting, I would have shut up. But I've just got confirmation that my payment is coming back, so that's going straight into my bank account that's set up for Adepticon. And that's my Adepticon money. That is my flight money. That is staying there. 2022 Adepticon, I'm going, which is, it's a real, it's over a year away, but it's nice to know it's there, something to plan for. Yeah, it's going to be strange. Going abroad is going to be weird, but exciting and fun. I hope. Yeah,
it's all going to feel it's all going to feel new, I think, again, in a perverse way.
While we're talking about events, I probably should say, so it's officially been announced now by Ben Curry that Blood and Glory won't be happening this year. It was a case of he had to kind of put the marker down to say, yes, it's happening early in the year. And as we said, it was uncertain. And I think I can't remember what date we were going for this year. But if there is there is still a chance that we do have a little blip of a lockdown later in the year. So bearing in mind the money's involved, decided, you know what, we'll miss a year. We'll come back in 2022. So not running that. So I won't have been running an event for, it's been a year and a quarter now since I've run an event. It's strange.
It's strange. Those sorts of breaks, you never know what can come out of those.
Yeah, not a lot for me. But it's all good. But yeah, we have seen. It's been interesting, I think, on the hobby front, and looking around the Facebook groups, the Twitter, and all that. I did put a question on Crusade and Heresy, asking who's picked the hobby up who's picked Heresy up in the last year or so, and there were a few, a good few answers. I don't treat it as anything scientific as the amount of people who replied. It is what it is. But what was interesting is almost all of them had some form of interest before, but a group of friends basically were the difference in making that jump. So I didn't get the feeling that anything specific had changed to bring people into the Horus Heresy, but that in the traditional manner, people's friends in gaming groups promoted the game, whether directly or indirectly, and people jumped into it through them, which I think is an important reminder that if you do want people to play your game, then you have to make it appealing for people that are near you to want to play your game.
Without question. I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, it would be lovely. Everyone wants that. Would be there to be suddenly a release, and it's very particular types of release. And I thought you mentioned earlier that we've seen this weekend the pre-orders go up for the Pariah Nexus box, and I've seen some very interesting, very well-reasoned discussions about that, and some less well-reasoned discussions about that. Who's that for? What's it for? How's it come about? Are you excited for it? Aren't you? Etc. Where's it come from? And I sort of think, okay, that Kill Team didn't have any releases at all, I don't think, in 2020. And so this has come along, and people were quite surprised by that, kind of. And it might be the lead into something else. Also, given the topic, given the setting that box is about, you get the feeling that might have been intended to come out earlier, perhaps when 40k was having its new edition, etc. You sort of think that it would be great if there was suddenly a Heresy thing, something more significant than a new resin model, that got a load of people caught behind it. Yeah, okay, everyone would like that. On the other hand, you do see, as you say, certain events, it's that conversation, isn't it? It's that conversation with someone. And I've seen it a lot. I've been a huge swell of this, and I think social media, all different channels of social media is seeing an increase in this, where people are saying, I finally got round to doing that X that I wanted to do for ages. People will have had their favourite legion. People will have had their favourite force, and this might have been an opportunity for them to explore an area that, like we said it earlier, people haven't necessarily had more hobby time. Maybe they have, but if they might be using this as an excuse to try something they've been meaning to do for a while, but never really had a reason to do so. And I think there's been a fair bit of that. I think there's been a few people who are trying things out, and it's that conversation where they go, should we do a little Zone Mortalis force? Yeah, let's do a Zone Mortalis force. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do. It's that kind of thing that suddenly kicks in.
Yeah, I think there's been the lack of events has played a part in that, because
Absolutely.
you're not just painting the 2 tanks that you need for your new event list, and all of a sudden there's no that pressure on you to update your Iron Warriors for the next event. I want to try this. It's not there, so you're like, what do I want to do? I bought one of them ages ago. So you have seen a lot of people painting just the odd random model. As you say, starting the odd project, and the Return to Isfan. It's a prime example. Essentially, it's an extension of clubmates getting you into something. Some cool people on the internet started this whole Return to Isfan thing. So all of a sudden, some people are like, oh yeah, cool, I'll do that. You only have to look at Nick Baton's March from a Crag that he does.
Very good point, yeah.
And admittedly, Nick's got that extra weight behind him because he's, GW, a face of GW, but people picked it up because it's something, and they were like, cool, I can be part of something, and why not? So March from a Crag's been running 2 or 3 years now, second or third year for it, and loads of people go and paint Ultramarines. Cool, but it's providing an opportunity, a reminder, and we need to do that. And you're right, output from Warhammer community about Heresy has been even leaner, actually, the last few months than it has been before, for whatever reason. And there could be a whole host of reasons for that, and not all of them are doom and gloom. So, who knows? I don't have any information, but I'm loath to just jump on the backs of him. I
don't think speculation on any of those sorts of things is particularly useful. I mean, it's sort of. I think there's you don't have to go very far for every game system under the sun to have negative feelings like that.
Absolutely.
I mentioned Kill Team earlier. I could think of Aeronautica. I could think of a whole bunch of them. It's not in that kind of realm, and there's far more enthusiasm, and partly because of its proximity to the main core games. But it's the enthusiasm amongst fans is well beyond any of the others. But as you say, it's more about those cornerstone conversations, articles, releases, events, or otherwise that would be there normally. Those aren't there, but I don't think that seems to have been that big a deal.
No, but what we have seen a couple of places is, the community, a community member or members picking up the baton, like with Return to Isfan. So I want to mention Nathan Jones on Crusade and Heresy. It's the pinned tweet. So if you go onto Crusade and Heresy and press announcements, it's the first one up there. It's an online links to feedback for FAQ and erratas. The original concept was an FAQ. As with all these things, loads of people have put their wish listing statements in there. More than it would be. I think he's trying to break it down on the forms itself. Essentially, it goes into a Google sheet that you can view. So there is an FAQ section and then a what do you want section, which is really handy because you can ignore most of that because there are some very strange suggestions. But there's an idea that there might be a general community FAQ. I'm not always for a general independent FAQ unless you have a gaming structure around it. So ITC can have an FAQ that can be used at their events because they're all part of that event. Like, the problem with a generic FAQ that people consider to be the Horus Heresy FAQ is if you just turn up to an event and you don't know that's around, it can cause problems. But there's no harm in having documents out there, and then if anyone's running an event, they can choose to use that FAQ as they wish. I have never seen an FAQ done like this for a game where I've used it 100% as it is. I will say that, but again, it's a great starting point if you play at home with your friend, and there's 2 or 3 of you, and you're like, we always have these questions, and most of them are answered here, but we don't like that. We think that's wrong. Cool. Use it, change it, adapt it. There's nothing wrong with building this. If Games Workshop aren't going to give us an FAQ at the moment, then cool, we make our own. And that has to be the
and
attitude.
I think there are examples of that. And I'd say it's of the more successfully supported, fan-supported games have done that. And I think it is a useful thing, actually. Those fan resources often accelerate this. It's very true in board games. It was very significant with Battlefleet Gothic, and still is.
Yep.
There was quite a lot of that, including a sort of semi-official, in that case, this High Admiralty group that was there were links with, when it wasn't semi, it was official. They just sort of managed the whole process. I think your point there about linking it to a particular sort of gaming environment, I thought was a good one, like the ITC type thing. That becomes such a clear cut. Okay, you're playing in this format or not, whether you're for that or against it. But I think the idea of treating it almost like a toolkit, it's a damn good resource,
yes.
whatever.
Yeah, and weirdly, I think the ITC was a really bad example because I think they allow you to run the event any way you wish. ETC or team championships or something like that might be more of a relevant one. Just before anyone goes...
The point being, it's of that kind of scale.
Yes.
It's of that kind of scale.
And structure.
There are gaming formats.
And
which I don't think other games have got. Certainly some of the specialist game type systems
don't. It's essentially what happened with Blood Bowl. They took the game on themselves because Games Workshop wasn't giving them something. So they kept adapting that rulebook and doing it in a positive manner. Will bring people towards you. Doing it in a negative manner will drive them away. And we've seen that with games over the years where communities don't go about things in the right way, and 90% of the times they fracture into smaller and smaller communities, and then all of a sudden when someone comes to play something, they're either put off by the fact that there's 5 or 6 versions, or your community doesn't have the critical mass it needs to attract new people to keep growing. And I always had an issue with Ninth Age, which was the independent version of Warhammer that carried it on, that for however many years they didn't have product on the shelf. And someone said to me, why do you need books on the shelf? And I was like, because if you don't attract new people, you will just wither and die. And eventually they got around and got books on the shelf, and they fair play to them, they made up a gaming system on the fly that was ideally used for team tournament events, but also individual events. And they had to learn a lot of hard lessons in changing the game too often and things like that, which I think can happen quite a lot as well. But they got books on shelves in the end, which gives you a chance because you need to attract new people. And people say, oh, well, why do we? Well, because you leak people from any gaming system. It happens through, whether that's through unfortunate circumstances, which there can be many, from selling your models to not being around anymore, through to just losing the love of it, or a new shiny comes along. So, you have to...
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is the evolution of games, isn't it? We're in a period where we have more game systems, more noise, positive noise, I'd like to think, around new things coming along that are inevitably attractive. Of course, there are games. I'm looking around here now at games as I've moved house. That brings it into stark relief. Where you've got here, I've got the Space Wolves chapter over there in epic scale. Am I ever going to use that again? I'm holding on to that for nostalgia, and for no other reason. I mean, it
Do you know
clearly
what?
Is.
I could do with some of them for some Titan bases.
I'll send them over. Mate, I've got hundreds of the damn thing.
Right, that's recorded.
That's it. Now it's locked in. But this is it. I mean, fantastic for stuff like that. And I'm looking at it, and I those were some of my favourite games. To this day, I remember playing in a disused military radio bunker down in dear old Dorset, where I grew up. I played the best war game I've ever played with those very Space Wolves, where there was an assault company holding a hill, stuff happening over on the left flank. It was just a back and forth in epic with the little turn counters, the little order counters, stuff like that. Fantastic. Have I played it in 20 years? No. And you think, and this is they wax and wane like that. You could argue, and I've seen it argued very eloquently, that Epic Armageddon. Epic Armageddon is one of the better game systems they ever did.
It was,
fantastic game system. But they wax and wane, as you say. They lose favour. People stop playing it because not other people aren't playing it. No new people are playing it.
And also,
that's not through any great fault.
Living in a modern world, which is always changing, Games Workshop have realised that the hybrid board miniature game works for a lot more people than a miniature game does. So Cursed City's coming out, and I haven't seen any gameplay, but they've smashed everything else beautifully. I'm just about to mail a guy back and say, yes, I'll have that commission painted for 150 quid to a decent standard. Thank you very much, because that's a cracking deal. And I'll put it on the shelf. So
yeah,
there's lots. What's the other thing that's going to be interesting is when we come back is people are hobbying, but there's been maybe a year and a half it's been happening, but particularly over lockdown, when I think people have looked differently at availability of models and things like that, but also just that we've had I talked to Grimdark Terrain on Full Stride. 3D printers have hit a price now where you can have one in your house. The landscape of armies might change as well. And particularly when in conjunction with things like Mournival Events Pack, where they've expanded the amount of unit types that are available, and not just Mournival Events, but other people as well. Are we going to see, and particularly with Heresy, in that 99% of the events, or 99.9% of the events that we play, are not held at a Games Workshop official venue, so you don't need Games Workshop official models for, I say, 99.9% of the players. There is a much more scope for 3D printing to, whether it's just parts or whether it is whole armies.
It's a very interesting topic, I think, because it's going to increasingly become something that everyone's going to talk about. We've spoken about this previously, but I think it reaches an interesting place because I've seen an upswell in the number of people who have the skill to model in 3D. And I'm coming from a position here, but for those who know, I'm an architect, so I have some 3D modeling capabilities. I have done 3D models of some vehicles. My Basilisk, I wanted the enclosed Basilisk. I didn't want to buy you couldn't buy the individual enclosing parts from Forge World, so I thought, okay, fine, I'll model that. I can do that. Used our 3D printer at work, which is more of an engineering scale one, which is a massive overuse of resources. I've seen this. There's been an unbelievable increase in the number of very capable designers, 3D designers, who are releasing their models for people to print at home or for licensed companies to print for people to buy. Because there's still a significant headache. It's massively increased in terms of this. I think there's still a problem with 3D printing. It hasn't quite found its indispensable use yet across in the world. It hasn't found it in. It's assisting manufacture. It's doing there's a number of things, and there's a lot of conversation about this, particularly in the building industry, about what it will be used for. Point being, you can get these hobby scale, a couple of £100, and it's still the cost of the material. Do you 3D model yourself? Can you? Have you then got to monitor the printing and everything else? But it does give a scope for a range of models, particularly when you start talking, even more so when you start talking at different scales. We were talking about Epic earlier there. My goodness, is there ever a game system that lends itself to the Epic scale, where it's sweeping scale? I actually want to field a Legion of Marines? Well, let's go. There's that kind of side of things. But equally, we've seen Kickstarters out there. There's the Lunar Auxilia we've seen around there, which is a fantastic range of models and alternative models. And then you start getting into a conversation of conversions. I wanted to take to the next Heresy weekend. I want to do a conversion of Gorchos, little sort of tabletop board game thing. I know Games Workshop did their own conversion of that for 40k. I'd quite like to do a version of that of a World Eater fighting pit. I think that'd be a fantastic. You could do conversions of Games Workshop games. You could do conversions, and I mean here of conversions of the game systems using models. You can start creating characters that they're never going to support, they're never going to make. It's a fantastic range of things. They're well beyond just buying kits and kit bashing. So talk about support from fans, opening up new worlds here, new avenues of what we can explore. It's a fantastic set of opportunities.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We're going to be talking to Mike French later on this episode about his journey a little bit into 3D designing and printing. And it has reached that point, and part of it is people have caught up with the skill level of designing. as well. So it all takes stages, doesn't it? And I think people have also worked out how to use Patreon well to make it worthwhile. I think that's an important part of it. Lots of little mixtures have come together. But you're right. There's this swell. It's a bit like Bitcoin in a way. The people who are behind it, who get something out of it, will rave about it. But for a lot of people, it's still not worthwhile. If you understand what I mean. But don't email me your views on any of this stuff. It's fine. I do not care. So for me, I know that the faff of little things going wrong, I don't deal well with that, with technology going a little bit wrong and me not quite understanding why, because I am that kind of guy. I can do, it's years since I've been any good with computers. I bundle along. And this show, shows sometimes how little I know what I'm doing. But it becomes, it's another hobby for a starter, in that the time you spend doing it and looking and designing, or even if you're just buying, it's all part of that beast. Two, it's more models. So if you do it right, in inverted commas, you might save money on what you would buy from a company. But do people ever do that? Or do they just print more and end up with a bigger pile of plastic? Right, which is another issue.
Yeah.
Where do you do it? Because it takes up room. It can smell. It's putting out it's playing with chemicals essentially. So if you've got young children and it's in the corner of the living room, that's probably not cool. So so that's an aspect of it as well. One thing I haven't really heard people talk about, and I will say it, and I'm not. I tend to be pretty laissez-faire with things like this normally, but I listen actually to the Two Piece podcast, which is a fantastic generic Games Workshop podcast, and they're like, put it on and overnight and come down in the morning, and sometimes it's a pile of goo, and sometimes it's beautiful models. As a firefighter, we would be saying shouldn't really have something like that running all night while you're asleep, because the bigger chances of fires occurring in your house are from appliances that are working. And then the problem is, it's a very small chance of happening, but the problem is when you're not awake to realise there's a problem, that's when you start to get, you've lost your outhouse or your utility room and part of your kitchen because your fire alarm eventually went off.
It's scary, isn't it, when you start talking about this stuff? So, and bearing in mind, when you talk about that, I mean, when at work we were looking to purchase a 3D printer and get into that kind of field, I went to the showroom for some of these 3D printers in Farring here in London, and bearing in mind they're there to sell these things. They're there to sell. Now these are the PLA kind of things. This is earlier days. We're talking 2014 kind of time. It's early days of 3D printers becoming commodities, and even the salesperson, particularly the more technically minded ones, who were saying, we leave these things on overnight because we're printing architectural models and others things there, and often we come in and find them as a pile of spaghetti on the floor. And you think that's fine, kind of. It's one thing in a work environment. You're doing that at home, there's all sorts of extra things at play. It has its issues. I just think it's interesting that there is enough interest and capability in the tools that are growing, and there's an accessibility. The learning curve for 3D modeling, particularly organic 3D modeling, so I'm talking anything with a curved surface there, from a shoulder pad through to full human figures, it's not straightforward. However, it used to be formidable. Now the tools are there. There's enough online resource that you could, if you are sufficiently motivated, you can go out and start experimenting with that. Vehicles and weapons, a whole other kind of thing. Suddenly you've got access to that. Now, if you don't want to bother with that, you've got, as you say, you've got Patreon, you've got platforms, established platforms that feel safe, rather than I've run an FTP site, just PayPal me some cash, please. Can you imagine? People aren't going to do it. Platforms now that allow these things to feel much more reasonable. Suddenly you've got access to a whole suite of models, and you think, I'm going to give that a go. I want to do that. I want to build a small force. I want to do whatever.
I'm trying to remember her name. There's a lady doing some. I think it's a woman doing some
I know the one you mean.
fabulous stuff.
They are spectacular. Yeah, I know the ones you mean. And I wish I could remember the name. You're going to have to put that out. You're going to have to tweet that or something out because it's worth getting people to have a look for inspiration if nothing else.
Yeah, and I'd be tempted to grab some of the stuff that she does if it was suitable for what I was doing at the time. But yeah, I'm definitely not getting the printer because I don't want to deal with the hassles. I don't really know where I'd put it. I know that it will become an obsession as much as anything else. I think what is important to remember is if you don't have a printer, you're still way in the majority. And if you're sufficiently motivated to go and overcome the various challenges that are in place with 3D printing, you're probably going to talk about it online. So there's going to be, you hear that, but my goodness. Or you can go to Forge World and buy the model. Yeah, clearly there's a vast majority of people who are going to do that well ahead of anything else. Yeah.
Like anything, new tool, new experiences are there, and they are adding a range of tools to what we already have in place. Yeah, absolutely. And it's weird because actually the Saturnine, not Saturnine Terminators that I'm seeing around a lot at the moment, there's about 3 or 4 different versions. And I will say I'm not the biggest fan of the Saturnine armour anyway. I'll get that out there straight away. But when some people are waxing lyrical about a couple of those, particularly there's 1 or 2 of them, and the people are waxing lyrical about them, I'm looking at them going, they've got no detail. They look terrible. Like, I think there's an element of people who are like, I can 3D print these are amazing. And I'm like, you can, but you're right, you need the design skills. And these people design better than I do. I'm not doing that. But when I'm comparing this stuff to Forge World, that's my base comparison. And I'm not going to say which ones I like and which ones I don't. And, it's cool if you like them, they're in your army. I do like the fact that you can up and down scale. I think that's pretty genius. I think some people's perception on scale is a little bit off as well. But, that's another thing. But do you mean scale within a game system?
Within the game system,
I'm going to stay within 28 mil. You mean up and down scale with that, or do you mean switch from 28 mil to 6 mil?
No, I mean I'm going to print these at 110% size because the scale suits, and then some people take that too far. But some of these things really are. I'm like, I'm not sure I'd want to see that across the table from me. Just because there's not just quality, it's design aesthetic, and I think some people do miss it, and that's an individual thing at the end of the day, I suppose. But I just
there's like anything like, you can have an opinion on people's paint jobs as well. But I know what you mean. But perhaps you talk about. I think that's something I would go for.
I think it's easier when it's people putting out stuff like that to get the feel wrong. But then that's down to the people buying it and choosing what uses their army. So maybe that's not a fair thing to say in reflection, and that's cool. And I'll accept that. But yeah, it's an interesting one. It really is.
It is because it's like the tools, and it's where the whole discussion of fan support becomes really quite interesting. In my professional life, we also produce textbooks. Now, speaking to my boss who founded the whole thing, he started out where they were completely beholden to publishers. He said, this is what we'd like to do, and they basically have to hand over the manuscript and hope that it came out in a way that they liked, and they tried to work as closely as they could. Then along came Quark Express, which has now been overtaken by InDesign, Adobe InDesign. The tools with which you take away from an industry, and I believe there's a whole conversation there about typesetters and similar, and Fleet Street and similar, but having strangleholds and things in newspapers. But there's a range of tools, really high-end professional tools that are coming into the hands of fans. So you can just go out and do it yourself. You aren't waiting for that release from a design house or a professional company or otherwise. There's tools. You can publish I'm looking over there, as you say, at the Morning on Events book. I've got one or two of their books on the shelf there. You can go out and do that yourself now. You could and we're not talking here publish in volume, but you could go and make yourself a book or whatever and have the quality of that just for your own enjoyment. We all quite enjoy those things. It's the same with the 3D printing. If you want to do that, there are things one can do if you have learned the 3D modeling capabilities that it would be impractical to do.
Yeah.
If you to do as a conversion.
Yeah.
I remember having a fantastic conversation with Darren Parwood back in a Games Day in about 2011, 2012. I think he just designed the Crassus assault transport thing, and it was fascinating hearing their adoption of 3D modeling, 3D printing at that time, and about who had the skill to do that, who modelled in a traditional way, and just watching around the periphery and talking to people at events about how much they've clearly adopted those digital tools, let alone before you start talking about 3D printing. It's just another tool, and suddenly the ability for people to pick that up themselves provides some fascinating experience.
It's one of those. It's like when airbrushing was first out. People were just like, "Oh yeah, it's brilliant! Like airbrushing means you can do this as well as these people, and you can do this as well as these people." And it's like, yeah, it means you can do that. It doesn't mean that you have done that. Like you have the ability to, you have the tools to do it now. Doesn't mean necessarily you have the skill level to do it. There's still a lot to learn. Some people are really smashing it, to be fair, but it's. It will be interesting to see what goes on. I think Heresy lends itself to it in a multitude of ways in the veteran gamers and in people having maybe a little bit more money to spend, or willing to spend more money, should I say? Maybe.
I think it's drive. Drive,
yeah.
I think it's a lot of people. I mean, I think you made this point on Full Stride, and I completely agree with this, or maybe it was just a part of it. And I think it's true of the larger Heresy. Obviously, Titanicus comes under the Heresy banner. Those who are sufficiently motivated and moved by the background to be really driven to give themselves over to Heresy in a big way, I think are people who are driven enough to push themselves to learn new skills, adopt new tools, experiment with these things, take it to another level. I think that you just get a higher frequency of that. Yes. You don't get people saying, "Hey, I'm just going to give this, I'm just going to clip these toy soldiers together and spray them red, and that'll be done." You are investing considerable creative energy into those things, which can lead you down the route of new tools. Yeah. What's really exciting is the amount of additional tuition that's out there. At a click of a button, at the click of a search, you can find a full video guide. Compare that with the little fold-out pamphlet that you used to get with the box of paints. I mean, we all love them. The one that taught you how to paint in bright red and goblin green with sand on the base, and the Bad Moon yellow dry brush over the top. It's worlds past from that. I mean, it was not that long ago we were in that place.
Absolutely. And then, as I say, and on top of that, you'll be able to use your models at almost every single event you go to. So, and that is an important factor. But yeah, I do think it's important just to remember that, you're not a pariah for not wanting to 3D print your own models.
Quite the opposite.
You're highlighting the drive and the desire to do that. As I say, we talked to Mike later in the show, who's possibly one of the prime examples of someone who has seen a goal and is learning new things to then try and achieve that goal. So there's lots of cool stuff. But we've managed to waffle on about nothing happening in the Heresy for 50 minutes. So
we do our best. We do our best with these things.
We're keeping.
And I could talk for another 50 minutes.
And I told my wife it won't take long. And we talked, off camera, as it were. We talked for a good 40 minutes before that. After telling my wife, don't worry, it'll only be a short one. Classic. But that's why I have a podcast, because I obviously need to talk. So it's all good fun.
That's why we're all here.
What could go wrong? So, thanks, Howard. We'll take a break and we'll come back and talk to Mike.
A pleasure.
I'd like to welcome to the show Mr. Mike French. How you doing, Mike?
I'm very well, thank yourself. How you doing?
Yeah, can't grumble. So people might have seen you pretty active on Crusade and Heresy. Is this one of your main places that you post stuff?
I used to. That's mainly now it's we've got a new group. It's just called Heresy I post most of my stuff on. Yeah, majority of it just on my own Instagram and Facebook mainly. Cool. I'm not too active in the groups. What's your
Instagram handle? We'll check it out now.
It's at Fellhanded. So I'm under Mike Fellhanded on Facebook and then at Fellhanded on Instagram.
Yeah, and I'll add that to the show notes as well, so people can look you up if they wish. And I got you on, because you're doing some funky stuff. But let's go right back. When did you get into Heresy?
At the start of when the Black Books came out, really. I've not been in it for that long. I wasn't really into it when I was a kid.
Not into any wargaming at all?
No. A friend had Warhammer, but I was never really into the painting or modelling side of it. I used to have the odd scale models and things like that because obviously growing up with my old fellow was in the parachute regiment. Then when I grew up, I'm in the parachute regiment now. But so I was always more running around getting muddy in fields and causing trouble than sitting down and actually doing something constructive. But I think when Forge World first brought the Black Book out was when I got into Heresy. One of the lads that I worked with that's on the same team as me, they used to play 40k, and then he showed me the Heresy book, so I started reading those. Then he said, the Forge World just brought these out, so then I bought a couple of models. I think the Fire Raptor might have been one of the first ones I bought,
Nice.
And I think the idea with that is get that one out of the way, and then anything after that is a breeze. So I've built the Fire Raptor, but that was quite hard, and then everything after that has been great. So it's start at the deep end.
That's it. And what do you have a specific legion that you affiliate with, or have you dabbled?
Dabbled over the years. The Wolves was my main one. That's the one that got me into it. The ones that I really liked because I read Prospero Burns and Thousand Suns, and that was me hooked on the Wolves. So I think I ended up with about 10,000 points of those at one point. They're all pretty much gone now. My Stormbird's been stripped back to resin, and that's going to get paid up for my Scars. So I've got a White Scars Legion at the moment. They've started getting built. I'm probably about 5,000 points in on that, as well as a million other projects that I've got on the go as well. I'm very much the hobby butterfly. I can't sit still for too long without my mind wandering onto something different.
Yeah. So the modelling, obviously, you say started with a Fire Raptor. You took to that fairly well. I would guess.
Yeah, I didn't find the Fire Raptor too bad actually. I've done a Fire Raptor and probably 4 Storm Eagles over the years, and I've never. They're a bit of a pain, but I've never had that much issue. A bit of hot water or a hairdryer on the sides, and it all seems to go into place. I've never really. That's the side of the hobby that I actually enjoy. So I'm painting side of it. I find a bit of a chore. I see painters. I've got to paint it to get it finished.
Sure.
Whereas the building side of it for me and the converting and actually getting the kits, and it's very hard for me to pick up a kit and then leave it as it is. I've always got to do something to it to try and make it a bit individual. I like my stuff to be not the run of the mill. So I like to change things up quite a bit. So I've always been playing around and converting and things like that. Yeah,
that's fair enough. And I really saw you started to play around in that aspect of things. That you're, as you say, you don't like much of the standard stuff. So from when you came in, how easy was it for you to look at stuff, decide what you want, and to go about doing it? Was it natural? It straight away?
Quite natural, if I'm honest. I've got quite a crazy imagination, so I'm quite good at looking at things and thinking, oh, that'd be cool. Half the time it doesn't turn like that. Half the time people only see what I put on Facebook. They don't see the piles of resin I've got out the back that actually full of bits. But I suppose I've always been quite good with my hands, and I've always been able to sort of visualize what I want in my head and then make that happen in the model. So I'm not one of those that goes in with a plan either. I'm very much on the back of a fag packet and think, yeah, that should work. And majority of the time, I like to say it does. But there is the odd one where I've got Primarks in bits where I've chopped bits off them and thought, right, well, I've ruined that one. But yeah, it's most of the time it goes quite well.
Oh, that's good. And when you started, was that kit bashing or right from the start? Were you getting to the point where you were like, I haven't got the bit I need to go a little bit extra?
No, majority of the time it's just kit bashing. I'd look at like a load of different kits and I thought, well, that sort of fits. The scale's about right, especially when you're going from like the old fantasy stuff to 40k stuff. It's majority of the time I don't really use a lot of plastics except for bits. I'm very much one of these resin nerds. I prefer working with resin. Not that I'm anything against the plastic. I just personally prefer the way the resin is. I like to be able to, so you get just simple things like heating and bending it, or the way it sands and files down a lot smoother. I struggle with the process, and I'm terrible with green stuff. So
right,
anytime I've got to sort of fill gaps or sculpting things, I'm not the best at it. So I prefer the resin because I just find it a lot easier to work with. But it started off as kit bashing. Yeah, when my wolves were, obviously when we first started this, we didn't have anything for the wolves. All the kits that have come out with the Terminators and things, we didn't have any of that. So a lot of my stuff was Heresy armor, but with bits added on from the plastic kits. And obviously 40k wolves are very lucky; they've got lots of bits that they can use for their armors. It's been around for a while. And the other stuff is a lot of it I'll do with painting as well. So for my Alpha Legion, I used a lot of stencils to make like dragon scales or Hydra scales down the side of the vehicles and stuff. So I think it's not just the converting side of it. There's a lot of other things you can do as well with the paint jobs and things like that, just to make them a little bit. I mean, I've got nothing against the original models. I absolutely love the models that Forge will put out. It's more, I like mine to be a bit more individual.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it makes them stand out, but also everyone's got their own impression of what a Legion is, what a Force is, and Games Workshop can only put out so many models at the end of the day. And even when those models are maybe roughly in the area of what you look like, they might not be suitable. Like, the Space Wars do have that issue where the perceived quality of those models is slightly behind some of the others. So
the banana fur. But again, that to me, I don't see that as an issue because I see that as quite a simple fix. I just take the fur down and put some more on. It's obviously a lot of people don't want to do that or haven't got the time or the skill to be able to do that. But I don't mind them Terminators. I think they're quite nice. I like them.
Yeah, I think generally I do as well. More for me, it's the weapon loadout. I immediately went, well, I need to change all the weapons. Yeah,
if you want the claw and the fist on there or something, it's you're stuck with an axe and a bolter.
Yeah, it is what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And particularly some of the Grace Layer parts, like some are hit and miss, but some of them are, when they hit, they really hit.
Yeah, so, I love the helmets. The helmets are great for if you're a 40k player and want a priest helmet, they're ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. There's lots of opportunity with those. So, coming in, mixing about bits and pieces. At what point did you start thinking, I need to make stuff to get where I need to be?
I think it was only like the last couple of years, really. I got chatting to Will Hayes at one of the open days. In fact, it might have been the last weekender that we had. I was chatting to him about the weapons and he talked me through it, and then he was very kind and sent me a couple of images and a piece that he carved to show me how to do it. And then I just got into carving my own weapons and a bit of practice, really, just because I wanted, again, have my own individual stuff. I thought might as well try and have a go at making blades. And the way Will sold it to me there, it was quite simple. It was, I think, a couple of weeks in practicing and playing around and a few cuts on my hands later, and I kind of got the gist of it. I like to simplify things down because I'm quite a lazy painter as well. Everything's airbrush, everything's stencils, and I try and do as little as possible with a normal brush. But it's the same goes with converting and things like that. If I can simplify it down and make it a bit easier, I will. So whereas for example, when Will was making a blade, to put the sort of the blood groove down the middle of a knife, or I can't remember what the real name for it is, but once to get that in, he would actually cut the blade in 4 parts. So we'd have 2 pieces sandwiched together either side of the blade, chamfer it, and then stick them together, and there's the actual bevel down the centre of the blade to cause the blood groove. I couldn't line it up. I tried probably for about a week every evening, couldn't line it up or anything. In the end, I just went and got my Dremel and just engraved a line down it. It's just little shortcuts like that I'm very much a big fan of.
Yeah, that's a little bit of an insight into design of models as well.
Yeah,
on their part and the levels they go to.
Oh, the detail is incredible on some of them swords and the blades.
Yeah, and it's marginal gains that have a big effect, but you have to ask yourself at every point, how far are you willing to go? I mean, how long it would take you to get to the point where you could do that every time.
Yeah. Once you start doing it, because a lot of it is. So for putting an edge on a blade, for example, so with the piece of plastic card I use, depending on how thick you want the blade, so majority of my sword blades they're around about 1.5 millimeters thick. So I get 2.75 pieces, glue it together, and then you use the seam for your edge of your blade all the way around the blade, and then all you do is shave it back and file it with files to that seam point, and then you can't notice the seam once it's together and filed. But it's a great line, so you can get that bevel nice and straight. The edge is perfectly straight. It's little tips like that you get off those guys at Forge World that really help. Little things that you wouldn't think of. I wouldn't stick 2 together because I'll see the seam. But yeah, it's
sure. So we're just talking regular. I can't remember what it's called now. Plasticard.
Bashing and stuff.
Your plasticard that you're using. It's just a regular plasticard. You don't get a specific.
No, just regular plasticards, and I use the sheets, different shapes as well. So like different squares and things, the rectangular sort of rods, any little bits I can get hold of really. Especially for basing as well. These little tiny, like you can get the sort of bead. It's like a semicircle sort of shape of beads great for putting around the rims of like steps and things like that on bases. Plasticard's great to work with as well. It cleans up really nice.
And when you're designing these things, obviously you said you got a good imagination. I'm sure, like you get these ideas in your head and then go to make them. Is it just from TV shows, and are you a history fan? Are you?
But majority of it's from the Forge World books and audio books. I'll sit around. They're both a great inspiration for me, but also my biggest downfall, because, for example, I was halfway through building a squad for my Scars, Red Saturnine, and now I am 3 characters in of the Trickster kill teams. So I mean, that majority of my stuff comes from there, from the Forge Black Library books, the Forge World books, and generally the background. But if I've got a certain idea in mind, I'll then go away and have a look at it. So when I was making glaives for my Scars, I'd go away and look at different glaive blades and things like that. And then a great one is I'll type in like fantasy glaive blade, so then it brings up different shaped ones from different genres and things like that. So it's anywhere really. I'm not really a history buff. I've never really been into history. Military history, I generally only look at for like my regiment and stuff. I've never really been that fussed on it. But I generally, if I get an idea, I'll then go away and have a look at that and see what I can find, take a bit of inspiration, or any crazy ideas I come up with myself. It's a bit of everything.
Cool. And working with that plasticard, because obviously they're quite, we're not talking a large pieces of plasticard here, are we, for miniatures? Do you have have you built up a go-to set of tools that you're always using, or is it very simple stuff that you just know how to use it?
Yeah, really simple. Majority of it is done with a hobby knife. I've got a couple of small files, like a little rat's tail file is quite good for doing sort of curved stuff, like the concave and convex shapes around blades and things. And I can't think what they're called now. They're like sanding pads. They're like sanding sticks
Yeah.
Little thin bits of foam with different grade sandpaper on. They're quite good. But majority of the time, especially for doing like a bevel on a blade, I will take the corner off the square piece of plastic card with a knife, and then almost like you're removing mold lines where you scrape the blade along it, and then you do that until the bevel meets the seam on the two pieces, and then just neaten it up with a bit of file or a bit of sandpaper or thing. So it's nothing special really that I use.
It's just patience and practice.
Yeah, and not being afraid to try it. I don't mean as I'm afraid that you're not going to do anything wrong, but give it a whirl, see what happens, and if it goes wrong, just all right, throw it away, start a new piece. It's a little piece of plastic card. It's nothing special, and just keep having a go at it more than anything. Perseverance is quite a good one.
Yeah. I'm surprised that you don't get on with green stuff. Is that a case of you've tried it and really doesn't click with you, or have you not given it enough of a go?
For me, I think it's the finish that I'm left with. I don't like the sort of the rubbery finish to it. I much prefer, like for all my bases, I'll use milliput,
right?
Because I know I can sand that down smooth and I can carve into it and what have you. But whereas I'm not a fan of the way the green stuff finishes. So when I've ever made like robes, for example, like the green stuff, I always find it's got too much of a rubbery sort of texture. I can never get a perfectly smooth texture.
Okay.
On the stuff, so it's
And there are there's plenty of products out there, whether it's milliput or green stuff or what have you. There's an option that you'll probably handle better than others.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
That's something to keep trying with. What's kind of like what's the hardest thing you've tried to do? For all that.
I haven't got a clue, to tell you the truth.
Well, if nothing stands out, that's fine. I mean, if everything's... I
found things awkward, but never like to the point where it's put me off. I've done I put turrets on the inside my like door gunners on Storm Eagles and things like that. It's all very fiddly and sort of minute little pieces that you're trying to get to put like hydraulics and things. Making hydraulics out of plastic hard tubing and stuff like that skill is quite fiddly, but it's never anything that I found difficult.
That's fair enough.
I found things a massive pain.
Sure.
Like the old drop pod, trying to get that to stay together. But the Dreadnought one. But apart from that, the Assault Ram was a bit of a pain as well to get everything lined up.
Right.
But again, it's doable.
And with regards to, because I can see, like when you're getting these blades or whatever, and getting onto the halves of the weapon, is it as simple as when you're doing a conversion with a plastic piece, or are you doing a little bit more on bringing the pieces together for the model? Does it work as simply as we think it should?
What you want for like attaching the blades to the handles?
Yeah, when you're coming to work with
it's quite simple. The blades, I generally use the hands that are already affixed to weapons.
Sure.
So I'll just take the blade off. I really like the Sanguinary Guards, the 40k one. There's their glaive in Carmine, I think it's called, and there's got a nice double-handed handle on that, and they're really good. So literally all I'll do is take a pin vise, drill down into the handle shaft, and then drill into the blade. Piece of thin wire holds it together, and a bit of glue, and that's generally about as far as I go for things like that. As I say, I always try and sort out the easier option rather than trying to overcomplicate things. Yeah,
and I think that's good for people to hear. Is essentially what you're doing is the extension of stuff we've probably already done.
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people they'll say, "Oh, I like that axe head, but I want him in a different pose." Them arms have got that handle. I'll just take the axe head off and stick it to the. I generally try and pin most of the things as well, just because I prefer it to be a bit firmer, especially with these thin blades and things. If I can get a pin into it, I will do, rather than just a dab of glue to hold it on top.
Sure. And essentially that goes all the way up when you were talking earlier about breaking a blade down into 4 parts. That's just an extension of simple processes.
Yeah,
but it's just a lot more involved.
And plastic cement as well for gluing plastic hard. So like your normal modeler's plastic cement rather than like trying to super glue it, works quite well. And if you are struggling to do two pieces together like that, where you're trying to fix the blades together, like different sides of the blades. Try and find a little metal surface, because the plastic glue won't adhere to the metal surface, obviously. So, whereas if you're doing it with super glue, it sticks to everything. So that you can actually buy real thin, and it comes in a bottle with a little brush of the plastic cement. And I use a lot of that to do when I'm building things for plastic art. I've got a little metal tray that I'll do on top of that, and then it doesn't matter if you drip it everywhere, because it just wipes off and nothing sticks to it. It only sticks to plastic, so it's quite handy for that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been in this hobby a long time, and the amount of times I've had to leave my fingers on a model for 40 minutes because I need that glue to set on the model before I try and peel my fingers away from it. Yeah, it's thank God we don't use metal anymore. Yeah.
Super glue accelerant is the way to go there.
Yeah, I never got good with that, but they are useful. Useful. I just try not to need too much super glue, where possible. Cool. So yeah, thanks for that. That's really cool, because seeing your stuff appear, and you've got pictures on your Instagram and of what you do and things like that as well.
Spam everywhere. Yeah.
But you decided that it wasn't enough to have a fancy blade here or there, or a door gunner, and you want some of your models to stand on more imposing pieces of scenery. Where did the idea come for making your own scenic bases or displays, really?
Yeah, well, I've always tried to do it with my bases. I've always tried to make them stand out a bit, not really stand out a bit more, but I like the narrative side of this hobby is one of the main things that appeals to me about it. So, like I say, when the book's my biggest downfall, because I'll read or listen to a part in the story, and I'll always want to try and recreate it or my version of it. So I've always had the background side of it that I want to capture more than anything, really. So when I've done my bases, I always try to embellish them a little bit.
Sure.
And obviously you're quite restricted when it comes to the size of the base you're on. And although I put all my characters go on 40mm bases, whether they're in power armor or terminal armor, just so I can make them look. I think they look a bit better anyway.
Right,
but so if I can then build that into a display, I just started building. We do a Secret Santa, the group that I'm in every year, and I always sort of put it on a little slaughter base. And it just got to the point where I thought, when I was doing one this year for Neil Chalice, and I thought they're quite good, these. I might make myself one. So then I made myself one. I had a few people ask, why don't I cast them up? And I've got a friend, John Kabosh, who runs Athena Miniatures. He's got all that kit for casting up his stuff that he sells, and he showed me how to do it, and he allows me to use his stuff for casting my bases. So it's a nice little partnership we got there. I don't think he gets much out of it, if I'm honest, John. I might have to make him something. He showed me how to cast them up. I cast up the bases. I've sold a few last couple of weeks, actually. That's pretty much where it came from. I was just like to make a little scene, right? Like I still haven't finished. I've done one for Titanicus with a Warlord, 2 Reavers, and 4 Warhounds on it that still needs finishing. But I'd rather it was more of a scene than just a model on an empty base.
Cool. So I'm guessing with having that stuff to hand made things a lot easier to jump in on, having someone to ask questions of as well.
Yeah. John's font of all knowledge for that sort of thing, so I was very lucky. Any trouble that I get into, he's always there to help me out. It's, the process itself is quite simple. It's just, but if you don't know, then you obviously don't know. It's once you get a little intro to it, it's nothing difficult. It's more just needing the equipment to set it up.
Yeah.
You need the vacuum chamber to get the air out of the resin and the silicone, and then pressure pot to push it into the little hidden places. So it's all quite expensive kit. You probably £1,000 to set yourself up properly.
Right, yeah. I mean, I used to make concrete paving slabs, and we used to do shaped concrete things, and it was all, building a frame, pouring rubber in and all that, and it was tricky for me. I'm not built that way, like when it comes to things like that, but trying to contain it all in the right kind of size, so you're not wasting too much rubber and all that kind of stuff. It's quite an involved process. With you, I suppose, with the bits you're doing as well, you've got to break those down a bit. I mean, if you've got a nice flat, like kind of a shape that's all kind of on not on one level, but on easy to access levels, I suppose that makes it easier. But you're now doing stuff with multiple levels. How easy is that to break up those pieces?
I'll generally, now that I know what I'm doing, I'll sort of put that into the process while I'm designing the base. So, for example, the bridge, when I made I've got a little bridge base with a little spiral stairs going up to it, and then the bridge piece with a 40mm inset base on the top. When I was designing that, I was quite conscious of the way it's going to go in the mould.
Right.
But when you put it in the mould, when it goes in the silicon, before you put it in the silicon, so I've got a little mould box that I make on there. He's got a laser cutter, so I cut a Perspex mould box, and then you've got to put the model into the actual base of the mould box, but it's facing upwards.
Sure.
Because the part that you've stuck it to the mould box, once you've taken it out of the mould, that's where your resin's going to go in. So you've got to sort of think 5 moves ahead with this sort of thing and think, right, well, the silicon's going to go that way, so I've got to make sure there's no trap points for the air coming out of the silicon. But then when I tip it upside down and pour the resin into it, I've got to then make sure there's no trap points for the resin, the air coming out of the resin. So it can be a bit of a mind juggle getting it in. But once you sort of get the idea for it, now that I'm designing them with that in mind, it very rarely does it sort of impact on the design that I want. But it does help later on when you're casting these things up to make sure that you're not having to break them down into more parts, because the more parts you've got, the more silicon you've got to use, the more expensive it becomes. And I was quite conscious that if I was selling these, I didn't want to sell them at an extortionate price. I'd rather try and keep the price down as much as possible. So the first one I made, I've been selling them for about £25, and I probably should have priced them a bit higher, just because that was the first one I made, and the silicon that I made was about 4 kilograms of silicon. I've since had to redo the mould, and I've knocked that down to about 1.5-2 kilograms of silicon. But because that's where the main price is in this sort of thing. The resin's pence. The resin costs absolutely next to nothing. It's just a couple of quid for the actual resin, whereas the silicon for that first mould probably cost me nearly £200.
Right. Yeah.
Because it is, I think, well, maybe not that much. I think a 2 kilogram pack was about 80 quid, so about 160 quid for the silicon. And obviously, you're only going to get, well, you're lucky if you get 10 out of a mould. So, but I'm all right though. I was quite delicate. I pushed it a bit. I think I got about 15 to 20 out of that first one. But normally, you're lucky if you get a run of 10 out of the silicon before the silicon starts tearing.
Sure. Yeah. And this process of is this as much a hobby now for you as the actual gaming and the modelling?
Not really. I didn't really plan on doing it because I'm doing the Kill Team Commanders out of Saturnine. I'm trying not to put any spoilers here, but the Operation Trickster in Saturnine, I wanted to do one of each of the characters out of it. So I thought, well, I'm going to do, so it looked nice on my cabinet, I'm going to do a nice little 100mm display base for each one. So I was always going to do them anyway. That was always my plan.
Right.
And then a few people have asked me, oh, I'd like one of them, cast it up. So it's got to the point where I'm doing them anyway for me. So it takes me a couple of days just to go up and get them cast and send them out. So that side of it is, I wouldn't say it's a chore, but it is definitely a bit of a pain. It's a long old day because at the moment I've only been doing, I'll cast up a little stock and then I'll put on my Facebook and say, look, I've got 10, who wants them? Rather than me taking orders and going away and casting them. I prefer it that way. I know it's a bit more manageable that way because I say it's probably a turnaround of an hour per one, and I don't really want to be sitting. And it's a 2-hour round trip drive to where John is. So, and obviously lockdown at the moment, I can't go to his unit if he's there. So it's out of hours. I'm generally sat there till about 2-3 in the morning, plodding away. So I'm a bit, so it's more of a chore than actually a hobby, I think, the casting side of it. But I don't mind doing it. it pays for me to do my next one. That's all that matters. As long as I get enough money out of it that it's covering my costs and it pays for the silicon to make the next one, then I'm not out of pocket. It doesn't really. I'm not that fussed.
But I've heard making resin models is really cheap. So
yeah, of course,
and doesn't take any effort. It's fine.
Well, I heard on the rumor train that Forge World will only cast, I think it's either 6 or 7 out of each mould before the mould's thrown away.
Blimey.
So you can imagine how much that costs to do when they're changing the moulds every 6 or 7 pours. And especially the multi-part kits as well. It's probably why the kits cost more money the more parts they've got, because the more parts, the more silicon.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
As I say, the resin's pence, so it's not the resin that costs the money, it's the moulds and the silicon and the time.
And everything else that they have to pay for around that as well.
I'm just some idiot in a garage. It doesn't really make a difference to me.
No, that's it. They're paying for the rules writers and the designers, and all that on top. I think it's quite good sometimes when there's a someone doing something in the community that's high profile, and it gives people an idea of what does go into the processes. And at the end of the day, Forge World have to make money as well. They are a company.
Do their business up. I know that for what we are, it's just a hobby and a bit of fun. It is an expensive hobby, but the way I say, no one's forcing you to do it. There's plenty of other hobbies out there. That Forge World aren't saying buy it or we'll come around your house and shoot you. There's plenty of other things to do out there.
Indeed, it's it is what it is at the end of the day. And the crazy thing is, we'll go and spend. People will go to Costa and buy a coffee. Or they could take one with them in a travel mug, and it would, okay, the quality's not quite as good, but you're saving yourself, you're paying a tenth of the price. But,
definitely.
But it's not too dissimilar to anything like that. Unfortunately, the money amounts we're talking are larger, so it feels worse in that instant. But yeah, I mean, the amount of times I've gone, I won't buy that at the moment. Yeah, I will get it. You just have to do what you do. But there are ways, as you say, you're trying to convert stuff and doing it yourself, partly to get what you want, but also, you play around with plasticard and it costs you time. But how much is a sheet of plasticard that you use?
Oh yeah, next to nothing really.
Yeah, so
a couple of quid. I get a pack of, I think it's 5 for about £3.50 or something like that. I bought off eBay for A4 sheets, that'll last me a whole year.
Yeah, and you're using tools you already have and own and use for other things. Yeah. So it might cost you the odd specific little tool here and there, but all of a sudden you can customize all your models without having to go, Egghead or whoever are great. Because for people like me who don't want to spend their time doing that because I've got too many other things I avoid doing as it is. I'll go and pay £3 for whatever. Yes. That's fine. Cool.
I do that as well. Egghead Miniatures is brilliant. It's one of my go-tos for if I'm ever after a bit of kit. I'm a big fan.
Yeah, indeed. That's cool. So, certainly I'm going to keep an eye on what you're doing. Maybe I should. I'll have to jump in on one of these bases at some point when I decide that I've got something worthy to put on a base like that. I'll keep an eye on your all your converting as well, because there's some really cool stuff you're doing.
Lovely. Cheers, Rod.
And again, just shout out your Instagram for people.
So, Instagram is at Fellhanded, and I'm Mike Fellhanded on Facebook. And if anyone's got any questions or anything that I've done, or even just wants to chat about something that I haven't done that they want my opinion on, then just let me know. I'm always really happy to chat and help out where I can. That's
really cool, and at some point I'm sure we'll be able to go to events again and things like that. So wherever an event,
another weekender. That's my
I don't know if that ship sailed, unfortunately, but we'll figure something out to replace it if it has. I'm sure.
I'd like to blame it on COVID, but we didn't get one last year either.
No, exactly. I think I think they're moving away from that. More's the pity, but there we go. What can we do?
It was always good for us all to catch up and have a weekend of geeking out.
Indeed, but there'll be open days and there'll be games days or Warhammer Fests and all the other options as well. Awesome, wonderful stuff, Mike. Thank you for coming on.
Hey, Greg. Good to chat to you, buddy.
What's a Geek Shield? Is it like a breacher shield?
Not exactly. Geek Shield is an insurance service giving you hobby rewards along the way. We appreciate that life insurance is a bore, so we wanted to make things a little more exciting with rewards that matter to you. Cool, right?
Okay, so why life insurance? I have feel no pain. Isn't that enough?
Very different thing. Life insurance can be used to settle off your mortgage, help with raising your children, or cover your funeral costs. It's never going to save you, but it will save your loved ones from financial disaster. Here's what some of our customers have to say.
Pete really will give his all to try and find a better policy for cheaper and give you vouchers. Why would you not do it?
It's great to know I have security for my family. Of that, I am certain.
Thanks to Geek Shield, my wife no questions if I'm still worth more alive.
Thanks to Geek Shield, I get to murder my family in the name of the dark guys and get all the money.
Yeah. So head over to geekshield.co.uk to book your free consultation today. Terms and conditions apply. Geek Shield is not a physical shield, nor will it save you from the Primordial Annihilator.
Well, I'd like to welcome back people who've been on the show before. One, Mr. Myles, and one, Mr. Matt. How you doing, gents?
Hello, how are we doing?
Hello, good. Yeah, only very recently as well. I was begging to come on your show for Christmas, and here I am again, begging, cap in hand.
Indeed, indeed. I should sell this advertising space for more, shouldn't I? I could be like Ant and Dec and be going to Disneyland for free, that kind of level. But we'll get there one day. They kept promising me money and drugs for podcasting heresy. Just waiting for it to roll in.
Waiting for the internet dollars to be converted into real money. Too right. Anyway, but we got you on because there's some big news with Little Legend. It feels like two galaxies colliding together. It's that huge of an announcement. So as you know, as part of the Commission Studio, we run a tutorial service and a one-to-one tuition. So PDF tutorials, video tutorials, learning tools for people to get better painters, as well as one-to-one online tuition. And I'm delighted to announce that a new instructor's come on board. I think you can guess who it is since he's been introduced already. Mathew Kane, the former Forge World miniature painter, the man who's partially responsible for the just visual language of Horus Heresy, which is so distinct and authentic, and let's face it, through the MKA course, has launched the careers of some of the best-known miniature painting names in the world. And I'm delighted to say that he'll be coming on board, producing tutorials, learning materials for students, as well as offering very, very limited tuition time, online tuition.
Awesome stuff. So Matt, welcome, I suppose. It sounds. I was when Myles put out the cryptic message about someone joining him. It was. I didn't really. I had no kind of ideas of who it could be, and then it was like announced it was you. It was like, oh, did not see that coming. So, how is it being part of the Myles crew?
Oh, it's good. It's good. So, as Myles and I have been discussing, for me, I am somebody that's driven by other people's passion.
Right.
So if somebody else is getting excited around me, it drives my excitement for the hobby. So Myles being an incredibly, what's the word for it?
Hot on sleeve.
Yeah, he lets his expressions loose, if you like.
Yeah.
Quite fluently, and that's exactly the sort of person that will drive me for my passion and my hobby. So being able to collaborate with Little Legend and be a part of is just absolutely fantastic, because not only will I get the opportunity to help other people with their painting, which is exactly what I have tried to do ever since I was in the studio when I started creating tutorials to go out through customer service, and then onto MKA, and then my own little bits and pieces that I've done since the MKA days. Now being part of a massive platform that is Little Legend, gives me that opportunity to engage with and help other people again, whilst also at the same time stimulating my hobby drive as well, which is just a win-win, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's one of those dirty little secrets of teachers, especially from my perspective, that I feel I gain just as much from the students as they do from any tuition that I give, because I'm exploring new ideas, I'm re-examining old ideas, and it's making me not only a more effective artist, but a more effective teacher. So it's that cycle of creativity that we're trying to breed as kind of like a culture behind Little Legend. So when you engage with the materials, you just... I mean, there's a lot of materials. There's like 6 years worth of materials up there at the moment. And every tutorial aims to teach you something, even if it's not specifically geared towards your what you're interested in at that particular time. So I've just released a series on how to paint box art for Morty and Cyberrat, where it includes how to build a liquid base, how to use fluorescent pigments, how to do non-metallic metal on the larger surface, how to paint rat fur. Now, these skills can be transferred over to anything. Well, it looks like there's some Cowdoor releases coming up, or Redemptionist. There's certainly some rats coming up for Cursed City. You can use those tutorials and transplant them elsewhere. So having, that base of enthusiasm, that culture that we've built up over the past 6 years, and to have Mathew on board as well, who, when we all started the Horus Heresy, and we started looking in, especially the Masterclass book. Do you remember the first time you looked at that thing? And you saw that list of equipment, like Mr. Shine floor polish. What the hell? An airbrush? What the hell is that?
Yeah.
It's these kind of learning resources that we want to bring to a new audience, a new generation of people.
And I suppose we're both talking there about being excited to teach. If you're not, then it becomes just a regular job. But then it becomes monotonous and it becomes mundane, and your teaching would then suffer within that as well. So without that kind of that feedback loop that you're getting, you would.
And let's face it,
suffer.
Who wants an enthusiastic teacher? Who wants to turn up to a lesson and okay?
Well, we've all had them, right?
6.
We've all had that one teacher where you're like, okay, yeah, just plod along, scribble in your notebook. Don't pay.
You're just waiting for your retirement, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Just don't do too much to get in trouble, and just survive the lesson. Yeah, and when you're offering a service like you are, then you might do one lesson, but you might not come back for the second. So yeah,
yeah, exactly.
That's it. Yeah, it's important, and yeah, we got now on here, Matt. I mean, there's lots been talked about. The early years of the Horus Heresy, and there's some videos. I see. Was it Race for Terror? Did a specific one looking back at the history, and I know you fed back a little bit on that one at one point.
Yeah, I went on I did an interview with them actually. It was really cool.
Yeah, and it's weird. I think it's part of the. So I'm glad I was involved with the Heresy when that first book came out. I was queuing up at Games Day, but someone coming in new sees things differently and looks at this as like the history of the Horus Heresy, and you're like, it's not history, it's current. And then you realise
it's still happening.
How long ago it was when it started. But that's good to see as well, and you'll get generations of Horus Heresy players who come into it with different approaches, which is all fun.
Yeah, it's lovely. I think what's not only drew people into the style of the Horus Heresy, but continues on to today. There's so much to explore behind it because it's an art style in all of itself. So we're seeing, especially with social media, a proliferation of different art styles, from illustrators to grimdark to like traditional Games Workshop is peaking again. And I think Forge World is a style in itself. We've talked about this extensively, kind of like behind the scenes, how even though both our art styles are different, we both want to have, fidelity to the lore. So we both want you to feel that when you view the artwork, you aren't viewing the artist, you aren't viewing techniques. Instead, you're being transported into that world, and you're almost taking like a snapshot. And these techniques, this style, can be translated effectively across anything. I mean, it'd be interesting to see how it engages with AOS miniatures, given their like very bright style. With current Games Workshop releases, Space Marines, Primaris, because the miniatures themselves being released, we've never had it better as miniature painters. The amount of textures, techniques, artists, entrepreneurs, the Kickstarters that are out there, that we are just flooded. We're saturated with so many good miniatures. Now it's time to pick a style. It's time to pick a methodology to paint all this grey resin that we have building up in our lockers.
Yeah. The miniatures that were released yesterday, Myles, you sent me a picture saying I'd love to see your take on these.
Oh, God, yeah, the Cursed City ones.
Yeah, and it was all the undead side of things. And I looked at those images, and in traditional Citadel style, it's all quite bright and clean. Whilst it was quite desaturated, if I was painting them, they would be far from clean. They would be extremely grimy and dark and gritty. Is that my style? I don't know, but when I think of undead, they're not clean. Whenever I watch Walking Dead or any undead movies, they're not clean. They're far from clean. They're absolutely filthy.
You've hit on something there. Is it your style? But I think that's a really important question to address there. It's your style to fit the mood, to fit the tone of the miniatures. With that world, for example, yeah, I completely 100% agree. It seems to me very grime, dirty, gritty. I used to play Wartime back in the day, so I want to bring that level of, like, it's oft-used phrase that gets mangled, but grimdark, that realism. So you use a technique and a tone that's appropriate for the job in question. If you are painting, say, a Guilliman, a 40k Guilliman, using those same types of techniques might not be, or Eldar rather is a better example, like a Farseer or something. Using those grime and gritty and dirty techniques might not be applicable. They might not translate over because you're trying to tell a different story. So Mathew and I think we're very similar in approach. You use the techniques that are appropriate to the job to tell the story you want to tell.
Sure, you can kind of tell that through my projects. If you look back when I did my Sons of Horus army when I was in the studio, that was quite gritty and dark. As time went on, my style evolved a little bit, and my latest army was my Custodes, all my Talons, and they're all very clean,
very polished, yeah.
And then Sanguinius, who I've just painted as well, he is absolutely pristine. It's the first model I've ever painted in a non-metal metallic. He's supposed to be angelic, so I've really tried to push that home. So I've not put in any griminess or darkness to that model. However, the purpose of those models in a really, really gritty, dark environment that is essentially Wartime, I do it in a really grim, industrial look, if you like, a really gritty technique.
So I'll just jump in there. I think there is an element of when, particularly for those kind of models, that kind of release that Games Workshop have, they want to show the model off as much as possible, and it's not, it's aimed at everyone, and it's aimed at new gamers and even board gamers and things like that. So there's an element of you paint it clean, you can see all the detail, which nature of the beast.
Need to emphasize, I love heavier metal style. I mean, you've seen the latest Slanesh releases, the Wizard with the opalescent.
Yeah.
It's not a question of the heavier metal style is exquisite in technique, and like you say, as promotional materials, it's clean, it's clear. It's visually very readable.
Yeah, clearly defined. And all that. Yeah. But what listening to you talk made me think, and I'm gonna use Batman as an example here. How many Batman films have there been? Like 7?
Yeah.
Coming up to the eighth, something like that. Whatever.
Yeah, let's go with that.
So if we look back at, say, Tim Burton, his take on Batman was very different from Joel Schumacher's, which was different. From the next one, and on you go. All of those tell the same story, effectively. They're all set in the same place, and in general, they all have a similar tone. Joel Schumacher went very different with that tone, but still kept a hold on Gotham as what it was. Mm-hmm. But essentially, that's all different types of painting.
Yeah.
When you look at it like that, they're all different ways of achieving the same thing. And I quite like just the idea of thinking about it as, we see different takes on films. It doesn't reduce the, you're going to have the one you click to. Mm-hmm. That's going to stand out for you. You're going to say Dark Knight Rises felt the best for me, or whatever. In the same way that you're going to look at loads of people's different Iron Warriors and go, that's the one I like. Which is cool, and we should be really welcoming of all those different approaches.
100%,
100%. What
100%.
we're trying to do between us, we can bring a wealth of different techniques and styles to suit other people.
Yeah, I mean, that's the aim, to show how to tell the story, how we would do it. Okay, perfect example. Have you seen the Mortal Kombat trailer?
I've seen bits of it.
How different in tone is that from the original? I love the original. I grew up with that film. The music, the action, the bad acting, love that film to bits. I dare say I love the new film to bits because they've gone with a different direction. You can't compare apples with oranges in that case. With miniature, I guess to condense this entire argument we should be more appreciative of different styles rather than saying one is better than the other.
Yes.
I think there's an element of that, and I think it's great to have that available at that level as well. And obviously you two working together bring different things in, which is great. So how's that working with the Patreon? So if someone signs up
at the moment, so as of March next month, right? Yeah, as of March next month, you'll be able to gain access to an exclusive Mathew Kane PDF. And he's working. He can reveal his project coming up there. I wouldn't want to steal his thunder. Every month from then on, you'll gain access for a $7 pledge to one exclusive PDF. At least one Mathew Kane exclusive PDF tutorial. Alongside this, you will be able, as of the 28th of February, at 9:30 in the morning and 8 o'clock in the evening, spaces will go live for one-to-one tuition. Now, these spaces are expected to go very, very quickly. So if you did want this opportunity, mark your alarm. They're for patrons only at the moment. So Patreon only on the 28th, and then we'll open up more spaces, if any are left available, to the general public on March the 1st. But we do expect them to go very quickly. So those are the two things we're offering at the moment. However, in the future, there will be video tutorials. Unfortunately, because of COVID and travel restrictions, we just can't meet up and work out the finer bits of video filming at the moment. But as soon as I can get over there, we'll set Mathew up and he'll be able to film all his projects. So in the future, at an indeterminate time, you will be able to gain access to video tutorials as well from him. So it's everything that's currently being offered by Little Legend Studio. That's the entire 6-year back catalogue, all the previous PDFs, seminars, videos, as well as Mathew's material coming out of the next few months, for no additional charge. There's no extra charges, no hidden extras, no hidden fees. It's $15 to gain access to all previous video tutorials, as well as future tutorials. That includes videos, PDFs, and tutorials, PDF tutorials. $7 for PDF. If you're signing up for the first time, to cut the confusion, just sign up for $15. It's around £13-ish to get access to everything that's been before. It's a sweet deal, and there's no obligation to stay with a service whatsoever. If you don't like it, if it's not for you, there's no minimum term, no minimum service. You can leave at any time. There's one more thing I needed to bring up. Completely lost my mind. But okay, the next. So, Mathew, what's our first PDF tutorial we will be releasing?
It's going to be on Blood Angel troop choices. So it'll be base level units for your army. So getting out your troops for your army to a high gaming standard. Some would say display standard. But the view is that you can then add to it to do your more elite choices with future PDFs.
Yeah, and this series of PDFs will be centered around Mathew's new army concept, his new army project. And it revolves around, I believe it's Shattered Legions, set during the Siege of Terra. So he's taken Primaris Marines, he's upscaled them, he's made them era appropriate. The materials he's been sending has been mind-blowing. First thing he's doing, Blood Angels to begin with. We'll have tutorials for White Scars, for Blood Angels, for Imperial Fists, and I dare say there might be a few cheeky Primarch tutorials thrown in there as well.
And also Imperial Army as well, because the whole project of the army is Defenders of Terra. It's not just any one of the armies, it's all of the armies included. So there will be Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, White Scars, Imperial Army, Talons of the Emperor, and everything that comes from them. So you've got armor, you've got gritty line regiments, you've got the Space Marines or the Astartes of the 3 legions, which are all converted massively, all using Primaris miniatures that I have completely stripped down of all Primaris looking parts to make them into Mark IV Marines. And then obviously with each legion, you get all of their own stylistic characteristics, like the White Scars and their jet bikes, and the Mongol look. Then you've got the Imperial Fists, which I could go clean, I could go dirty, whichever one I want to do at the time. And then the Blood Angels with their exquisiteness, if you like. And then it also gives me the opportunity to not just worry about one army's Rite of War, one army's Primarch. I could switch and choose between any one of them at any time, and gives me the opportunity to paint 3 Primarchs and show people how to do it.
Cool, excellent. How have you found? So, obviously you've taught face to face and all that. How have you found writing the tutorials and things?
Well, it's a big learning process because I've never done PDF tutorials anymore. Before. So I started off, I just had my phone to take pictures on, which were not particularly good. And then since then, Myles has said, well, you're going to need this and this and this. And £2,500 later, I've now bought myself a lot of equipment to set up and do lessons and take good pictures. So that's a big experience in the start, if financial outlay is an experience. But you have to bring the quality to people. So I've taken lots and lots and lots of pictures. I've sent Myles over 2,000 pictures of my work since I started in the studio to now. And then writing all the stuff as well. Because I've not just done PDFs. I've written a load of articles for the forthcoming months, going right into depth about what my hobby was, where I started as a child to where I am now, the projects that I've done in between, how I achieve certain things within those projects. So things like the absolute pain in the ass that is the Sons of Horus colour scheme. It's everything. I've spent hours and hours and hours making these articles so that I can engage with and hopefully get everybody who's part of Lil Legend or follows Lil Legend to enthuse them, because like I say, enthusiasm breeds enthusiasm, and for me, I get excited off of other people's passion. So I like to think that there's a possibility that could happen for other people if they get to see and know me and then what I'm bringing to the show. Perhaps that's going to excite them to do more with us as well.
Oh God, yeah, and you know what? As a Heresy enthusiast, it's nice peeking behind the windows, behind the scenes, as it were, especially in the early Heresy. Some of the decision making, some of the I guess ethos that went into the original books, how they developed, stuff about Mathew's Ultramarine army, the decisions why he showed, and curiously enough, why he doesn't like traitors. But we'll leave that for the articles. You can read about that yourself. But I found that just little tidbits like that you just kind of it makes you reminisce for the good old days of Horus Heresy. And hopefully they'll come round again.
Matt, so is this like the first place we get a detailed breakdown of things like Sons of Horus colour scheme that you did in the books? Yeah,
so I will be giving guides of how I achieved the the schemes. It won't so much be a detailed breakdown to, every single thing that went into it, but it does express what a complete pain in the ass making the scheme was, because developing the paint scheme, which then went on to become the Forgeworld colours, was so difficult. And I made my first pot, and my God, do I ever wish that I made more than one pot, because the second that it ran out, I had to replicate it. And could I get it the same? Could I heck? So across my army, nothing. There was two ages of my army, if you like, where one was slightly different in tone, because the replication of that colour was just a pain in the bum. And when the Forgeworld paints came about, that gave you a grounding to be able to achieve that same paint colour all the time, which was great. And there's tons of different ways of achieving that paint scheme that so many different people have come up with. But to go into the background of creating that colour, it wasn't a very enjoyable situation.
No, and you can read about it all on littlelegendstudio.com in the next coming months.
Exactly. Awesome stuff. Anything else you want to...
I guess the future, what we have planned. So we have a rough outline. We do want to, of course, look back at the classic Horus Heresy, but we also want to emphasize very much that Mathew's an artist in and of his own right, and he's moving forward with new projects and new ideas. So that's why I'm so keen for us to explore together things like AOS, different model ranges, different busts, for example, just to see what you can do, what you can manipulate, what you can get out of you as a miniature artist. It's not about us showing off our skills. It's about creating clear, legible guides for you to improve your miniature painting. And the best variety that we can get, well, the more varied the subjects, the wider the scope of our field. Of course, there will be guides on previous legions. So we were, like Mathew said, we'll be looking at Sons of Horus, we'll be looking at Raven Guard, we'll be looking at Iron Hands, looking at those more esoteric color schemes. We'll also be looking towards the future as well, to see whatever wonderful machinations that will be thrown up in the future. And more importantly, we want to gather feedback. We want you to let us know what you'd be interested in painting. I think a bit of a home run at the moment, the very obvious thing, is the Cursed City. So there will be a series on that. As soon as we can get our hold on the box set, there'll be a full series on each and every character, as well as all the undead, all the antagonists, all the just everything to get painted in a good amount of time. So we want a very high quality finish, but that doesn't take years to achieve.
Sure.
So that's that. But we want to hear from you. We want to, like I say, we have a really nice community there at the moment, and it's only growing, thankfully, and it will only get stronger with Mathew on board. So we want to know what materials will help you to be a better miniature painter.
Yeah, I've also said to Myles about collaborating between ourselves as artists to help with and engage the public as well. And that is that the idea that I came up with, we take a model and we both paint that model up exactly how we would do with guides to go with it. And then we open up the forum to other people, including each other, on what other people would do to critique that model and how they would go about improving it. So my idea was that I would get my model to a certain standard, and then I would give it to Myles so that he can add his input to it as well,
right?
And vice versa. So it collaborates different styles, because obviously Myles and I do have different styles, and how different styles can change an overall opinion, an overall finish on a piece. It also helps to get interaction with everybody and make the hobby community get that little bit of excitement back to it.
It's just fun as well. It's just fun doing crazy stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also what I like was sensible and clever is it adds more value to you're not just getting here's how we paint this. you're getting more approaches to doing something, so your value gets added to what people are signing up for.
Oh God, yeah. So the tutorials have always had that ethos. It's not only telling you step by step, I use this here, I use that there. It shows you the underlying structure of the piece, goes into color theory, why we choose the colors that we do, how they interact, how they inform tone, as well as looking at some of the more technical aspects of it. So there are a wide variety of tutorials out there, from beginner to masters. Some tutorials are aimed... So even if you just need that step-by-step in the tutorial, we provide that. If you want to know the reasoning and the inspirations behind it, you get that as well. If you want the more nitty-gritty technical details, well, you get that as well.
Cool. Excellent stuff. Well, we'll look forward to seeing that all come out.
Thank you very much. Can I just, emphasize again? So on the 28th of February, lessons go live at 9:30 in the morning. That's UK, and 8 o'clock in the evening. And again, that's UK time for Mathew. PDF tutorial. First PDF tutorial will be coming early next month. You can sign up for a full year's worth of subscription at any level, and you get 10% off. You get 10% off the total subscription fee if you decide to sign up like that.
Wonderful stuff. Well, we look forward to seeing what you guys come up with.
Looking forward to it.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us on board again, Greg.
That's all right. My pleasure. My pleasure. And, well, I'm sure I'll have you boys on again at some point. So it's all good.
Yeah, and please ask a painting question as well. Over Christmas, the only painting question I got from you was, how do you make me sit down and paint?
Well, that's the big one. No,
that's the question.
That's is the question. All the other questions come after that first question.
I'm still figuring that one out. Okay, I'll get an answer back to you on that one.
I've been doing bits and pieces, but you know, I just need to get more, less hobbies would be a start, but you know how it is.
Yeah.
Wonderful. All right then, gents. We'll catch you another time.
Nice one. Cheers, Greg.
Beautiful. Bye. Bye.
Well, you've made it to the end of another episode of The Imperial Truth. Thank you very much for listening. I did have some stuff that I was going to talk about in the outro, stuff that's happened between the recording and trying to get this out, which is a little bit late, but life is a bit manic at the moment. However, those things, I believe, could turn into bigger topics. So rather than just mentioning them here, I think we'll save them for another show, and maybe... some of them have got a little bit more info to come as well, I think. So there's a few things going on, which is quite interesting, and hopefully we'll come back with that either next month or, let's say, maybe a little bit later. If you have questions, if you have things you wish you think we could discuss, if you have ideas for topics, if you have any other ideas around the show or what we do, then please feel free to email Greg at theimperialtruth.com. You can also contact me via the Twitter, the Facebook, the Instagram at Childofang, Imperial_Truth on Twitter. And search for the Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes as normal, along with the link to get shirts and jumpers and things, as well as the Patreon if you're feeling that way inclined. And I'm going to look into getting a coffee account as well, because I know that subscribing to Patreon isn't everyone's bag, and that's fine. So we can go that way. No one has to use any of these things, absolutely. But many thanks for those who do. So fingers crossed for us here in the UK as we move through March that things do well with the schools going back. Everything seems to work out okay. We can hope and dream, and maybe this summer we will be seeing each other at some events, or even just if it's garage gaming or clubs opening or anything like that will be great. I understand there might be some ideas to talk around all that happening. So we'll do that. I'm not going to talk about Mortis. Mortis was one of the things I was considering talking about. Maybe we will do a non-spoiler piece on it next episode, but I am looking forward to when it's on general release. We'll probably do the similar kind of thing we did with Saturnine, which it does involve me getting the audiobook, so I do have to wait for that anyway to do the notes, because my reading pile is monstrously huge, and I can listen to it and get my thoughts in order and see what bits I missed out on and everything else. Although it is good. I say we're probably waiting another month, 2 months for that to be on general release, but hopefully that will be out. But that's enough of all that. Look after yourselves, guys and girls. Keep heresying, and until next time, you have been listening to The Imperial Truth.